Hi, everybody. We're the Skeleton Crew, and today we are going to be talking about a fairly thick-nosed lizard. Fail. If you know Greek, you might be able to tell what dinosaur it is as it walks by.
An Italian fence lizard.
Look at it, it's hunching back. We're the Skeleton Crew, and we're going to talk about that dinosaur today. I've lost my train of thought completely. Let's just start the video. Yeah, I did. I'm Dr. James Napoli. And I don't know where I work. No, I work at the, I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences and North Carolina State University.
My name is Amelia Zilo. I'm a PhD candidate at the American Museum of Natural History.
My name is Scott Johnston, and I am the vertebrate paleontology fossil preparator and technician at Harvard University's Museum of Comparative Zoology.
Hi, I'm Alex Rubenstahl, and it is said I'll never die.
Where do you go?
He's dancing.
I'm dancing still, and I'm dancing at Yale University. Which is probably where the judge went, if we're being honest. Probably where he was educated.
Yeah, definitely. Isn't the biology building named after him? The collections building at the
It's old enough. The time period works.
Right. The Judge Holden Peabody Museum of Natural History Collections with the quote, "All that in nature that exists without my knowledge exists without my consent."
He was the most...
Do you have any idea how hard of a quote that would be to have above a museum?
It's a good book. Read it.
It's a very good book.
It's a good book. A lot of scalping.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of scalping.
Babies and trees. Good stuff. Amelia.
A lot of mud.
Dalton.
Dalton.
Jesus wept. Believe it or not, I'm Dalton Meyer. And I haven't read Blood Meridian, and now I kind of don't want to anymore.
That's fair.
It's
Not because of the content, but just because of how often we talk about it. I'm a guy at Yale, and together we're the Skeleton
Crew. God, we're extra unhinged today.
Yeah, we know we've got to make 3 videos tonight.
I don't know about that.
I'm going to send these guys out. Is everybody ready to watch?
Yeah, let's watch them be bored.
Watch. Listen.
Watching.
Learn.
Oh, James, also I have the names of those people. I'll just email them to you.
Yeah, you could send them via text. It would be okay, too.
I'm going to email them. No, kidding.
Send them via fax, please.
Yeah. Anyway, this is Pachyrhinosaurus, right?
Yeah.
It's a good I like.
It's not just Pachyrhinosaurus.
What is it?
It's a very specific species of Pachyrhinosaurus. Pachyrhinosaurus lakustai.
Right, which is a fun thing because
Lakustai.
I always say lakustai.
Lakustai. Mm.
Yeah. I don't know where the emphasis is actually supposed to go, but it's a scientific name.
I think from the name of the person who it's named after, I would guess it's lakustai.
Okay, that's good to know. So Pachyrhinosaurus is one of the rare dinosaurs that is actually known from multiple species, which is cool. It's known from 3 right now.
Yes. In fact, it's the most specious centrosaurian.
Wow.
I'm sorry, Scott. I have to jump in here for a grammatical pet. It's specios. Specious is, I believe, I believe specious means uncertain. Yeah, it means. I'm sorry. No, specious is a word I used a lot in my PhD, which translates to superficially plausible, but actually wrong.
It has been said that I'm the most pedantic member of the crew, and I would like to contest that based on the evidence here.
I'm sorry. I just love the idea of it being like, this is the most specious dinosaur. It's factually incorrect, even though it looks right.
All right, everybody. All audience. I hope that you can forgive me for my unforgivable conflation of saying specious instead of specious.
Specios.
Leviosa. Fine. Christ on a bike.
Scott, that was a very nice introduction you did before this. Would you like to continue?
Yeah, I think you should try again. I'm sorry.
Taking my Pachyrhinosaurus and going home.
No, you don't have to restart. Just, a lot of species.
Yes.
Most
it has the most species of any centrosaurian. I thought you were going to actually be about something important, like, oh no, there's a, like... like damn Medusa ceratops is known from like 200,000 species or something like that, and all of them are named after.
Well, to actually you again, ceratopsians include Psittacosaurus, don't they?
He didn't say ceratopsians. He said centrosaurians.
I said centrosaurians.
Actually you.
Yeah, well, all right. Let the record show that I don't remember what he actually said, and we'll find out in editing if I'm wrong.
Let the record show that James doesn't listen to me. You know they're friends when they fight like an old married couple.
Yeah. Anyway.
Okay. There's 3 species of Pachyrhinosaurus. Damn it.
Oh, whoa, what's this? A new species was just named.
There's Pachyrhinosaurus lakustai. There's Pachyrhinosaurus canadensis. And there's Pachyrhinosaurus paratorum.
Yep.
Yes, there are.
Canadensis was named first. It's the largest one. Lakustai and Paratorum are roughly the same size. Lakustai was named next. Paratorum most recently. Canadensis is from Dinosaur Park. Lakustai is from
the Wapiti Formation.
Yes, the Wapiti Formation, and is known very well from the Pipestone Creek bone bed. And Paratorum is everybody's favorite man from the North Country up in Alaska at the Prince Creek Formation.
I thought Canadensis came from Horseshoe Canyon, not Dinosaur Park.
It's both, I believe.
It's both?
I know that there's at least one in Dinosaur Park.
Yeah.
Okay. But I think the type does come from Horseshoe Canyon. I'm not. I'm sorry, Scott. I don't really mean to be going after you in particular for the opening of the video, but as I do more work on the animals from that area, that could imply something very interesting biologically if it were in both. I don't know if the Dinosaur Park stuff is actually formally described or identified.
No, I amend my statement. I am not so certain that it's in Dinosaur Park.
I might be just legit wrong on this. It's in
Horseshoe Canyon and the St. Mary River Formation. Is Canadensis. There may be Pachyrhinosaur material from Dinosaur Park, but I don't know of it.
This could also be interesting because Achelosaurus is a little bit older, and it might be relatively equivalent of Dinosaur Park depending on the age of the sediments it's from. It's from 2 Medicine. Anyway.
Well, but so, we've got 3 species of
there's a Pachyrhinosaurus-like centrosaurian from there, but it is not formally Pachyrhinosaurus. So I was wrong. Horseshoe Canyon. Apologies.
Okay. But it's all right. They are very similar. The biotas are very, very similar. It's an easy mistake to make. I mean, basically, for my work, it's Dinosaur Park is Gorgosaurus and Horseshoe Canyon is Albertosaurus.
Yep.
Which means that as I've heard it said once, from I won't name the source in case they wouldn't want me repeating this with their name, but you can tell Albertosaurus apart from Gorgosaurus because Albertosaurus is black and Gorgosaurus is brown, because basically it's just the fossils from the Horseshoe Canyon tend to be a darker color. Yeah, right. And that's kind of how a lot of these identifications.
That's really funny.
Yeah, it's just you can tell by the color of the bone.
But how do we identify the different species of Pachyrhinosaurus, though?
Well, that's a good question, Scott. So this is lakustai, and this is probably the easiest one to identify because it's got these midline spikes on the frill.
It's also the coolest.
It's the coolest one.
Hands down.
This is the cool Pachyrhinosaur.
I like it ambling through these trees.
But I think the thing that's worth mentioning is that the holotype of Paratorum doesn't actually have that region preserved.
I think that we've found more material from it, and it's not just one individual.
I would not be surprised, but also Paratorum has anteriorly curving. Well, so the horns on the midline here around this concavity. No, I'm looking at the skull diagram right now.
That was a misinterpretation of taphonomic damage.
Oh,
their little horns also point in the same direction.
Well, then never mind. Me, I guess.
Sorry.
It's okay.
The sword bites both ways.
They call Dalton a ceratopsian because his head is sharp.
This is my favorite episode of the Skeleton Crew, is somehow we all serially get everything wrong about Pachyrhinosaurus, only to be corrected. There's a statistical phenomenon.
Nothing.
Right, that's true.
So I can't be wrong yet.
Yeah, not yet. There's a statistical phenomenon called wisdom of the crowd. And I think that's what we're seeing here, which is that in aggregate, we know something about this animal. But individually, we don't know very much about this animal. And that's not because it's not well studied. It's just kind of not something. And it's none of us work on ceratopsians, really.
This is why there's 5 of us.
Not well studied by us.
A house divided against itself can know things about Pachyrhinosaurus.
Anyway, yeah, this is the cool one.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's also
in addition to having the what I see frequently referred to as comb-like horns that are coming out of that's the parietal, right?
Yes.
Right there?
Yeah.
Of the parietal right there above the big boss. It is also worth noting that the boss on lakustai actually has kind of a very pronounced, what I've also seen referred to as almost a prow at the front on a lot of specimens, where it's like almost angled forward and more pronounced from the rest of the nose there, which is something that the model kind of gets, but I wish that they went a little bit farther.
Yeah.
Some of the other Pachyrhinosaurs, especially because we know that this would have been most likely covered with some sort of keratin or cornified tissue or something like that. Some of the other species, I guess, well, I think both of the other species of Pachyrhinosaurus, but namely Paratorum, the nose just kind of has a bit of just kind of a curve to it as it goes up, and the boss is kind of a little bit hidden in that. But in lakustai, it's very prominent.
Yeah. There's something else about lakustai that's pretty cool, and it's not on every specimen, but the rostral bone, which is the tip of the beak, it is the beak tip there. On some specimens of lakustai, it has what they refer to as a rostral comb, and like the edge is kind of raggedy, right where it meets the like the premaxilla and the nasals. And they've chosen not to depict that. In this particular instance, there's no rostral comb, but not all specimens of lakustai have it. So it's been postulated, not really postulated, it's been put forward that could be a potentially sexually dimorphic thing. There's not enough of a sample to know and test that, but it is at least individually variable, and we don't see it in this model. But just because we don't see it doesn't make the model bad.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Speaking of the horn, or lack thereof, it's a good segue to talk about some anatomy as well as what the animal's name means, which James did say earlier in the video, but Pachyrhinosaurus is the thick-nosed lizard. So named...
We're the same, he and I.
Because it's thick. And you may be wondering, we also mentioned it's a centrosaur, and most centrosaurs have a large to moderately sized nasal horn. Most, not all.
The more I've seen centrosaurs, the more I disagree with that.
This is true. That used to hold true before we found a bunch that don't have them.
Centrosaurus has a large
and
Styracosaurus.
And Styracosaurus, and Ioneosaurus, and I'm being hard pressed to find more.
Does the real Sinoceratops have a pointy nasal horn?
It
does. It does.
Okay.
Okay, Sinoceratops then.
But it doesn't seem to be very pointy. I think we talked about this in the Sinoceratops video. It looks kind of like Wendy Ceratops. Now. Yeah, go watch that one. That one was funnier than this one.
Look at the link.
And come back.
Yeah.
And finish watching this one.
Actually, play them both simultaneously. That'll be great for our viewership metrics.
And great for your ears.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You'll love it. We're actually perfectly in sync. You might not know this, but this video's audio and that video's audio perfectly sync up. Go try it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Took a lot of work on our end.
But this is a terrible video. Oh my god.
No, it's not. The base of this, what most people call rostral boss, which is this big kind of keratinous blob at the front of the head of Pachyrhinosaurus, was a bit of an enigma when they found it, because it was the first ceratopsian that had any structure at all like this that was found. It was described in 1950, I believe. And at the time, it was like, okay, well, this probably supported just like a big hunk of Well, Sternberg described it as chitinous, but I don't think he was being particularly serious in that description. I think that was more meant to evoke a vibe as opposed to actually imply it had chitin, like
chitinous vibes.
But it's got a base, and we'll throw a picture of a Pachyrhinosaurus skull up. It's got this kind of fluted base, and it would have been encased in a big kind of cornified, keratinized blob like this. But there was discussion in the literature of whether this actually was supporting like a large nasal horn, because of, well, there were two schools of thoughts. And it's interesting that this has achieved depiction. You may have seen this depicted in a few media instances. There's some toys that have Pachyrhinosaurus with a big nasal horn. Famously, the PBS animated documentary Dinosaurs with an exclamation point, which I love tremendously, depicted herds of Pachyrhinosaurus with horns. When Lakustai was found in this bone bed, which is the kind of famous one that may have been a big flood event, there was a lot of media associated with that depicted Lakustai in particular as having a big nasal horn. There's at least one documentary that had it, but I don't remember the name.
Jurassic Fight Club.
That's
not a documentary, but
okay. So it was something. It's interesting that this appeared.
Alex is chuckling.
It's interesting to me, kind of why that this phenomenon of a Pachyrhinosaurus with a horn achieved, I wouldn't say widespread, but at least semi-notable media depiction, when the literature almost never actually says anything in support of this. So there's a paper by Langston describing the skull of Pachyrhinosaurus, and Langston says there's kind of two possibilities. Either this thing's supporting a boss or it's supporting a horn. And if it's supporting a horn, then there's two ways it could have done that. One, this could be a traditional bony horn core like in other ceratopsians that just broke. Not an unreasonable thought to have if you only have one, but we have a lot more than one, and they all have this same shape. And they're not all breaking their horns off in the same way. So that you can kind of rule that one out just by virtue of having multiple specimens. The other idea would be that, and this is kind of why it was floated, and I think this may have been an idea mostly pioneered by Phil Curry, which is that the kind of texture of the bony boss is reminiscent of the texture that you see in modern rhinoceroses, wherein you have a keratin horn that's supported by a rugose bony base. And the thought was that, this could be supporting a lighter, almost entirely keratinous horn at the base of something very rugose. Langston said, I think pretty succinctly, why would one small group of ceratopsians lose the horn lose the structure of the horns seen in the entire rest of the group only to re-evolve a horn in a very different way? Mm-hmm. It's not impossible, but it is kind of sus. And then more work done in, I believe, 2008, actually looking at bony correlates for things like rhinoceros horns and various scales showed, I think, more convincingly, looking at the texture of the boss and the histology of the boss, that this probably wasn't acting as the base for a keratinous big horn, but was instead more like what you see in a muskox, where it's supporting just a big hardened tissue boss like this. So another interesting argument that was put forward in favor of a larger horn is that when this was originally described, the thought was that they were using them as battering rams against one another and kind of pushing against one another like muskox might do. Not, I think, an unreasonable idea for what they might be doing with these bosses. But with Lakustai in particular, the thought was, if they're ramming their heads into one another, these parietal horns are going to stab one another and cause wounds. Okay. But if there's if the surface of this nasal structure goes beyond the edge of the parietal horn, then that would prevent that from happening. It's not a very convincing argument, I don't think. And I think there are ways the animals could have prevented stabbing each other while still doing ritualistic combat.
I'm sorry.
It's like the overbearing mother approach to paleontology. It's like, they can't do that. They would hurt themselves.
No, Alex, I heard it too.
When Dalton was describing them bonking their heads together, I heard someone drop something that was just that made the bonk sound.
James said something on his desk, and it went donk, bonk.
It was like you used a soundboard. It was that perfect.
It was so funny.
That's good.
So, Dalton, do you have more to say on this point? Because I have 2 points that I thought of during.
Mine was only to say that the evidence of both the actual, like, the physical evidence as well as the kind of more philosophical, why would this structure evolve this way, all point to this just being a boss.
So I have 2 points that I kind of thought of while you were talking about this thing. One is I find it really interesting that it is very frequently, as you said, popular depictions of Pachyrhinosaurus lakustai that are traditionally shown with the horn. And I think that there are two things that kind of so I have a headcanon. I'll put it that way. So I've seen in some references to this species talking about that parietal comb horn thing as a unicorn-like horn behind the eyes. And I wonder if that is a misinterpretation of references to this species, of just like, oh, it had a unicorn-like horn, and then they see the big bit there and put a big horn there. Especially also because I find it interesting that while we very frequently see Pachyrhinosaurus, or not frequently, but more frequently see Pachyrhinosaurus depicted with a big old nose horn based off that, Pachyrhinosaurus does have two little, like, over the orbits bosses too, that correlate to, like, where you would traditionally see, like, the brow horns on a triceratops. I have never seen a Pachyrhinosaurus depicted with keratinous brow horns. Dalton, have you?
Found one, and it's in the paper that describes Lakutsai. One of the figures, figure 4 of this paper has a skeletal reconstruction of Pachyrhinosaurus lakustai.
We were bound to do it at some point.
It has a skeletal reconstruction, and then that's A. And panel B is 2 life reconstructions of different options. One is with bosses, and one is with horns. And it's got a humongous nasal horn and 2 smaller brow horns. And so it basically looks like a weird triceratops. And it's very funny that Langston is one of the authors of this paper. The figure caption it reads as follows: life reconstruction showing 2 possible options for keratinous coverings of the nasal and suborbital bosses. Note that Langston does not subscribe to the idea of keratinous horns. So presumably in the writing of the paper, Langston was like, please, in this figure, make it known that I don't endorse this idea.
That's very, very funny.
I want to say there's one other place where you can still see that kind of depiction, and that's outside of the Tyrrell.
Interesting.
They have a couple of life models of a herd of Pachyrhinosaurus, and I think maybe when Phil was at the Tyrrell, if this was an idea he supported. And they're kind of depicted in an odd way. Like, they're jagged, I think.
Oh, they're kind of like... That was pretty popular. They're not...
So this is bizarre.
Yeah, go ahead.
But there are so the Bruce Museum, a small museum in Greenwich, Connecticut, that is run by currently, I think the curator there is Dan Sepka, a former student of Jim's who does fossil birds. He
was a student of Jim's?
Yeah, I think.
When? Or he was Mark's
maybe a
student.
postdoc of Jim's. Something. He has some relation to Jim.
Okay.
But that museum, for whatever reason, has a statue of a Pachyrhinosaurus lakutsai and a baby out front.
Can you send
I'm going
a picture?
to send you a picture, right now. And I promise this is a real picture. It's not the picture like the last time. And it's got the big old giant double, and like it's got the double horn, and it's going like curving anteriorly.
Yeah, look at that.
So,
I think this is probably Lacus because it's got like the.
Yeah, I think it has to be based on Lakustai.
Yeah,
these are all from the same mount.
Oh, okay, interesting.
So what
nice
Amelia?
It's got a baby.
threw in chat the second that I was looking this up because I was like, this sounds really awesome. It looks like this family of Pachyrhinosaurus used to all have that big spiky nose horn thing, and then they were updated.
Oh.
So here's the old family with all three of them with the big spiky nose horns. Here is what I assume to be an after.
Yeah.
Huh, that's interesting. And Amelia, you took that picture you sent yourself, right? That looks like it's your own photo. Oh no, you found that online?
No, I found it online. I will look.
Yeah, you know what, Scott? I think you're dead on here, brother.
And I think this reflects the fact that, like, as we've implied, and I think it's actually pretty. The evidence shows that it seems that the nose horn was Phil Curry's idea, and it was something that he strongly supported. And I don't think without reason. I want to be clear, like.
Yeah, no, there's good reason to think
it was not an unreasonable thing to think, given the evidence at hand. But in light of other arguments and in light of new evidence, including that paper that I mentioned that described the osteological correlates, which I believe he was on, has more conclusively shown that the boss is the hypothesis that's more consistent with the data. And so probably then those statues were updated. Like, well, as good scientists should do in light of new evidence, have changed the ideas that they support.
Yeah. Amelia, you were at the Tyrrell most recently. Do you remember what they looked like?
No. I thought I just checked. I thought I took pictures. I just remember them being there. But I would have remembered if they had weird big rhino horns.
Okay. So yeah, you presumably saw it after they changed it. Because when I was last there in 2014, I mean, I haven't been back in a while. I'm trying to go back for work. But when I was there, they were all the weird comb.
I've never been.
Nope.
Yeah, it sucks for you. It's a great museum.
Good place.
Yep. Yeah, sorry. I like it there a lot. I want to go back.
I've never been. Off.
Well,
that's very interesting, Scott.
I'm sure you could hang out with Brady if you wanted.
I could, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
So
anyway.
I cede the floor now. I apologize for monopolizing the horn discussion. I got excited about it when I read about it.
That's okay. No, I think that's an interesting point. Because, it is not often we get to actually talk about the life reconstruction of dinosaurs in a scientifically informed way and talk about changing favorite hypotheses.
Indeed.
I think beyond, like, theropods are mostly feathered, / like all dinosaurs probably plesiomorphically feathered. There's not a lot of... Right, there's not a lot of cases where it's like, hey, we don't know what this looks like, and there's been research on it, and the answer has changed. I think it's an important thing to bring up. One thing I want to... no, I'm not done.
Oh, but you've set up the perfect segue.
Go ahead.
For woolly Pachyrhinosaurus.
Yeah, all right, we have. Okay, may I talk about it a little bit?
Sure.
So you may have seen... Well, there's a couple of things, right? So Pachyrhinosaurus... I just got to say this right now, and I don't want this to, like, give away my ranking. I'm amazed that this dinosaur is as popular as it is. I don't think it's that cool. And yet everybody's like, oh yeah, we got to show Pachyrhinosaurus.
It's so much stuff.
Why? It's like...
It's big Canada.
It's the only one of these really cool animals that doesn't have the really cool feature.
Right. It's like it's like making a movie about a group of people. It's like The Great Gatsby being about Nick Carraway. It's like why? This one whiny guy from the Midwest who's just like, I think people on the East Coast are kind of decadent, aren't they?
It's the end. Sorry.
No, it's just, I don't know. There's interesting people in The Great Gatsby. None of them are the narrator. I know that's the point.
It's the ending of The Fableman. Phil Curry is sitting in a desk across from a young researcher. He's saying, if you have a big nasal horn, it's interesting. If you have big postorbital horns, they're interesting. If you don't have a nasal horn, it's boring as That is an incredibly niche reference to a Steven Spielberg movie nobody saw.
That was a perfect impression of David Lynch doing an impression of John Ford. That was great.
I'm glad you liked it.
My lord. Anyway, I'm just amazed that everybody wants to put this dinosaur in their media. I'm just like amazed. It shows up in TV shows. It shows up in toys. It shows up in documentaries. The Walking with Dinosaurs 3D movie was about it.
Which, damn. What a cool idea for a movie that was murdered in the crib.
I mean, it was murdered on the way out of the birth canal.
It really was.
It's like the doctor was just waiting there with a 9mm. Like, all right, bud, I'm sorry.
Oh Jesus!
God, because like when Dalton was talking about these things like charging into each other and stuff, like I imagine 4 out of the 5 of us have seen this movie.
I have not seen this movie.
3, James and I have seen this movie.
Amelia, have you seen the movie?
No.
Okay, so yeah, me and Scott have seen the movie.
Okay.
There's this one scene in that movie where like the 2 brother Pachyrhinosaurus are challenging each other for like dominance in the herd and stuff in this like burned out forest. And
sounds cool.
It is one of, I'm taking out the qualifier, it is the most gorgeously animated like dinosaur combat I've ever seen. Like there's this incredible slow-mo shot where they first hit each other, where you just see the ripples of all the soft tissue going through their entire bodies,
right? And their spines like compressing from the force.
Their spines compress, and it's just they rear up a bit from hitting the like resistance of each other, and the birds flying away in the background, and the sun. God, it's such a good shot.
And they like take out trees and stuff. Like it's really, I mean, this is the thing that I just, in terms of cultural depictions of dinosaurs, I really want to see more. These were massive animals. Have you ever seen what elephants do to forests when they walk through them? Like it probably changed the structure of the ecosystem, right? Like any small vegetation was probably getting torn up a lot.
I mean,
now knowing what I know about the film, at the conclusion of this cool display, does one of them go, "Youchers, that sure hurt"?
Right.
I literally think the bird says that after the big hit.
Yeah, well,
and I wanted
that's gotta
to
hurt.
explode.
That's gotta smart.
I wanted to detonate.
It's just so sad because it really is like beautifully well done, and it's one of the few things that I think really conveys the size of this kind of animal. Like these things are enormous.
I mean, Pachyrhinosaurus isn't like Triceratops size, but it's a big critter.
Right.
It's definitely one of the bigger ones.
Whereas like medium-sized predator is like something that weighs a metric ton and is 30 feet long. Like a medium-sized predator is a dog. Like, excuse me.
Yeah. Like it's also just like, God, how pretty that movie. I remember like in another later scene, there's again one of the most gorgeous shots I've ever seen, where it's like it's a Gorgosaurus. I know it's become like the Gorgosaurus in like all media now because it's such a damn good design, even though it's supposed to be Nanuqsaurus. But we didn't know what Nanuqsaurus was at the time, so sure. Where like it's the Nanuqsaurus that's like eating the brother rival and like has him by the back of the neck and it's trying to kill him. And then I remember there's that gorgeous shot where it like zooms in on it, like wrestling with the back of its neck and stuff. And then like the eye looks up and you see the reflection of the charging Pachyrhinosaurus in the eye, and the pupil just dilates and then it gets smashed and teeth fly out. It's like, God!
I mean, the baby was born. The doctor was like, "Beautiful baby boy," and then shot it. And that's what that's what the studio system did to this movie. For anybody unaware with the story, because like this was when I was in college, this movie came out.
Very cool that you saw this.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing.
I was so psyched with it.
No, it was a studio decision that the childish voices were added like late in post, right before release. It was supposed to be a silent film about a dinosaur with like good special effects. And they had Steve Brusati and a lot of other people on the scientific consultancy, and they did a lot of work for it. The dinosaur designs were some of the best I'd ever seen at that point. And
they're mind-blowing.
It was like 6 weeks before recording, before release, they were just like, nobody's going to see this movie. We have to add these stupid voiceovers. And it's like, it's so obviously tacked on because they're not really, like their dialogue isn't really related to the story. It's like a narration of what's happening. Like there's a forest fire and the voices are like, "Oh wow, the fire! Look at the fire!"
And the dinosaurs don't like
playing with toys.
Like, right? No, they're not actually talking or anything. It's not like Land Before Time or something like that, where it's like they're like telepathically communicating.
Right.
As now, one thing,
dinosaurs were
that they didn't.
Me, an empath.
Oh, that's not true.
No, it's not.
That they were psychic is what I meant.
Right, of course. There is a release of the movie that doesn't have any of the narration.
Which I have not seen.
I have seen it. I literally bought the Blu-ray to watch it, and except for a couple of like stupid little musical cues they put into the soundtrack, and the fact that every time a new dinosaur comes on screen, there's like a freeze frame with its name so that you can see what it's called. Mm-hmm. Honestly, it's a fairly okay movie. It's not what it was supposed to be. And I can only imagine how upset everybody was when it came out. Anyway.
I just thought it was such a good joke.
Anyway, all I'm trying to say is I'm amazed that it shows up in so much media because I don't think it's a particularly like interesting or cool looking animal, like relative to Styracosaurus.
I think it has the same appeal as like a rhinoceros. Like not because of the name, but it's like more people than I would expect like really think rhinos are cool or really think elephants are cool. Like it has that big like
I think
big animal with armor vibe. Like I do too, but like not in the same way that like some other animals with fancier horns and things, you know. Like I think that's the appeal. Like it's big, it's chunky, it's headbutting, it's like Triceratops, but it's a rhino, you know?
I mean, I personally love how much of a blunt instrument it is. Like this thing just became a sledgehammer. And it was just like, most of this other ornamentation is extraneous. I am going to get as good as possible as smashing something to smithereens with my face and not be a pachycephalosaur.
I understand. But anyway, this is all supposed to be a lead into. Amazingly, A, it's in a lot of media, and B, there's a paleo art meme about it that I think needs to be talked about, which is the wool. And I believe this all started
that's how this started.
Right. I believe this started with an illustration from Mark Whitten, where in the illustration and in the blog post he made, he's explicitly saying, like, I'm exploring kind of outlandish ideas in my art. And to his credit, like, he wasn't saying, I think it was like this. He was saying, well, we know that they lived at pretty high latitudes, and, like, the Prince Creek Formation is now within the Arctic Circle and was then too. And so he was like, hell, maybe they got woolly like muskox. We wouldn't know that from the fossil record, but it, could have happened if they were living in cold climates. Then, thank you, Alex. You're really on fire in the chat. We can't show on screen tonight. But anyway, after that point, everything has started showing. After that point, but a lot.
It did it again.
What did it again?
Someone else heard it that time, right?
Well, this is every time James touches his mic stand.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Sorry. So basically, a lot of depictions of Pachyrhinosaurus since that illustration by Mark Whitten have copied it, and it's become a paleo art meme that this was a woolly animal.
Especially Paratorum.
Especially Paratorum, which is the one that's known from the high latitudes.
Yeah.
The possibility of filaments in ceratopsians is something that I believe in strongly, but they would be like an elephant, like the little hairs on an elephant. You would have to get really close to them to see them. They're like sticking out between scales, maybe, if they're there.
Right. And that's it. We know that in very basal ceratopsians, they have already been reduced to a midline row as a substantial structure. Mm-hmm. It is not impossible that they would re-expand that, but it does seem like probably a thing that can't be walked back once it happens. Like, we know that Psittacosaurus is mostly scaly. I love the idea that ceratopsians might have been kind of thorny almost, with like big quill-like filaments. It looks cool.
Yeah, from the nipple scales, right?
Well, right, that's been an idea, is that the nipple scales would hold a quill. I don't think there's any evidence of that.
No.
I don't think so either.
I just like saying nipple scale. But I think what I do like is the depiction of Pachyrhinosaurus Paratorum in Prehistoric Planet, and it is diagnosably Paratorum in Prehistoric Planet.
Yes.
Shows them as quilled, which I think is a very cool flair for the design. It's also one of their more, for me, it's up there with Chinchousaurus in terms of being like absolutely my brain cannot accept that it's not a real animal.
Yeah.
It's a very, very good model.
And they do even go a little bit speculative with it. They, besides the giving it quills, pretty extensive quills, they also give it rectangular pupils in that.
Right.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it looks like it's got goat eyes.
I've never seen that segment, so I'm looking up images now.
It's honestly, it may be, it is one of my favorite segments from the first season. Because it also gets like really, because it's them in a forest and then a group of Nanuqsaurus start chasing them. And then they wind up being chased into the open and then a blizzard descends. And it's this wonderful combination of the beautiful, of like really good, well animated and like compelling dinosaur action with this kind of driving natural phenomenon that I think is like incredibly dramatic.
They also do
say it's one of the best segments in the entire first season.
They also do a fun thing that doesn't get shown much in any nature documentary, and that's hunts that take a very, very, very long time. It is stated in that segment that this hunt takes at least overnight.
Right.
That like both parties kind of hunker down for the blizzard, but neither of them wants to move because the other could either outmaneuver or escape. So like there's a great shot of like in the morning after the blizzard passes of one of the Nanuqsaurus like coming up out of a snowbank and shaking itself off and then
pretty cool.
Like restarting this fight.
The point I want to make is that the Prince Creek Formation, where Pachyrhinosaurus Pedantry comes from, is often depicted as a very snowy tundra. And I think that is because of a little bit of a miscommunication that happens a lot. The Prince Creek Formation is and was north of the Arctic Circle. So you would have had 6 months a year of perpetual darkness. It would have been one of the coldest places on Earth. The paleoclimate evidence we have for it does not suggest that it was frigid. It was probably, I don't know. I mean, it was definitely seasonally cold. I'm sure it snowed there. Like it was dark for half the year. And I think that's the more interesting thing is we have good evidence that the herbivores were resident year round. Young were being born and raised there. There's some really, really interesting work on the fossils from there that shows like you've got young of the year, which is, a technical term in ecology, right? These are the animals born that year that are living there year round. There's no evidence of migration. So there, you've got giant herbivores living in an area where there's no photosynthesis going on for 6 months of the year.
That's and the histology really cool. Shows that.
Right, right. I mean, it's one of the most thorough scientific evaluations of the paleoecology of a particular site that I've seen. It's really, really good.
Yeah.
Do we know what kinds of plants were there that were
Let me check the paper. I mean, I assume it's similar to what kind of live north of the Arctic Circle now. Like, you can get, pine trees that do that, right?
I think so.
But, I don't really know.
I think I've even spoken about this exact place before on the channel, but it's one of the things that I like to think about, which is it's one of these environments that's totally lost to time that we have not ever seen. And it's one that could be reclaimed, frankly, as the Earth gets warmer, but not in human lifespan, even with anthropogenic climate change. But the idea of cold but not permafrost levels of temperature at the Arctic Circle, because you have the same daylight forcings going on but vastly different temperatures, and it's clear that that the ecosystem's very different, and we just don't have an analog for it today. It's unclear how the plants are surviving this. It's unclear how herbivores are surviving. It's an outstanding and very interesting question of these environments that we just cannot recapture. We have no analog for.
Right. And I mean, the evidence is really astounding. We'll link the paper in the description. I think it may be open access. Yes, it's open access, so anybody can read it. Amelia, they don't address particularly what foliage was there, but they do provide, and I'll see if I can find anything on that in a moment, but they do provide an estimate for mean annual temperature, which is about 43 degrees Fahrenheit or 6 degrees Celsius, mean annual temperature. So it's cold, but it is not what we think of as polar tundra now. And they do say it definitely snowed occasionally.
Because, tundras are predominantly grasses, right?
Well, nowadays,
yeah. So like conifers.
Mm-hmm. What would it be? Like Dalton was saying, like what it do?
Well, that's like.
Also, how do you have a forest where it's dark so long? Someone explain.
I don't know. What is a savanna without grass? Is another thing I thought.
Dino magic.
Like,
okay.
How do you have?
So we have
polar forests.
According to Wikipedia. Well, I think they just stop photosynthesizing for half the year. Like they just pick it up, right?
That's
wild.
Listen.
I mean, it's not that weird. Angiosperms also don't photosynthesize for half the year, but they don't have leaves.
But like, are these things seeing in low light like half the year?
I mean, they must be.
Yes.
And
they're no light.
Lemurs and stuff up there. What is happening? Like frugivores? Like, how does it work?
Well, so the plant evidence we have are we have everything from algae, fern, mosses, pollen from trees, shrubs, and herbs. It appears to have been a polar woodland lacking ground ice with dinosaurs dominating and angiosperms dominating above them. So maybe it's that angiosperms that drop their leaves are more able to deal with those conditions.
Yeah, so like an extreme deciduous.
I can think of a major Just So story out of that.
That they evolved to drop their leaves because of this?
Yeah, that deciduous behavior evolved from daylight forcing as opposed to temperature forcing.
Well, I mean,
I guess it is still daylight.
Get some water.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know anything about plants. I don't care to.
In any case, yeah. What's going on?
Something's happening in his house. Continue.
Well,
Alex is getting water.
Oh, he's getting water? Okay.
I mean, Alex's point is is good though. Like, this is a really, really interesting environment. It is, from what I see on social media, one of the worst places to do paleontological fieldwork I can imagine, because I don't like being that cold. You're basically cold and wet the entire time, and I am so happy that Pat Druckenmiller and Greg Erickson and others are willing to do field work in these conditions.
And
because I would not be.
No,
these are also places that
Tony Fiorillo, right?
These are also places that are really, 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 really hard to get in or out of.
Yeah.
In that, I've heard about. I've heard stories from colleagues about excavating Pachyrhinosaurus material in the Prince Creek, and they had to use helicopters.
Right. And so in case anybody's curious, basically the evidence is that because of the preponderance of perinatal remains in the microfossils and the long incubation periods for these animals, they have to have been nesting there. I mean, the paper is much more, the paper puts it in much more detail than I have right now, but that's the takeaway, right? There's a lot of babies. They are nesting there. They're not migrating. And there's babies of a lot of different clades. Like there's young tyrannosaur material. There's dromaeosaurs. There's hadrosaurs, I think ceratopsian. Bird stuff. Like, it's interesting.
We call them night babies.
And they are living in 6 months of perpetual darkness. That is a cool environment, but it is cool both in terms of it's neat and because it was cold. But it was not so cold that you'd expect every animal there to have developed a thick, woolly, dense covering to deal with it.
Especially if it's like a large animal that can heat itself up from its own body heat.
Right. And I mean, so I think some evidence has been put forth that ceratopsians may have been secondarily ectothermic, but even so, at that mass, they're going to be easily maintaining a fairly stable body temperature. Although, honestly, the presence of those animals in 6 months of perpetual darkness to me indicates that they were probably endotherms. One thing you don't really get up in Prince Creek are crocodilians.
Is that true?
I believe so. You don't get crocs, and I think you don't get turtles.
Really?
Yeah.
I almost can't believe that, frankly.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it is not a condition that most reptiles are able to tolerate now.
It should be known. just that the sample for potential secondary kind of ectothermy or lower metabolic rates for ceratopsians is in Triceratops, and so we don't like it, that definitely
which was living balmy in balmy.
That's a Bayou boy, so
right.
On the Bayou.
Yeah, I mean, so the faunal list on Wikipedia, which is obviously not the official source, and there may be material I'm unaware of, but there's no ectothermic animals or members of ectothermic groups, which would make sense because they do need sunlight to warm themselves up. They would not do well for 6 months of darkness. They would have to hibernate.
Torpor.
Brumate, if you will.
What do you think?
Brumate.
You think Nanosaurus could have been a shaggy dog, though?
I mean, it's maybe more likely than some of the other things. We know that Tyrrellus was densely feathered.
I was about to say more like
Tyrrellus.
Yeah, and I mean, this area is definitely colder than where Tyrrellus is living. Like, Tyrrellus is living in a cold environment in the way that, like, as we said,
Boston
Massachusetts
is
is cold. Right. Like, it's not exactly frigid. Yeah, ooh, the Northeast. I'm feeling a bit chilly around Christmas time.
If that's the case, then what if it's not? What if the feathers in Tyrrellus have nothing to do with keeping it warm? Like,
that's also possible.
Maybe this one isn't, and like Tyrrellus is just weird.
You mentioned that maybe Tyrrellus isn't fluffy for insulation in a cold climate. I think that's probably right. I think maybe tyrannosaurs are ancestrally fuzzy, which we do know from Dylong. And I don't think Tyrrellus was big enough that it needed to lose the feathering. Right?
It's pretty big.
It is pretty big, but I mean, like, its body mass is about 1 ton. That's not listen, I do think that animals like Rex sized were probably not covered in dense feathering. I think like a prehistoric planet type depiction is reasonable, right? Where you've got extremely reduced, very fine feathering over the body. But those animals were so big they would not have needed it, right? A 1 ton animal, I don't have any problem with that still having feathering.
What's about 1 tons today? Like
a large cow, right? Like, they don't have huge shaggy feathers, but like I don't know.
And like muskox,
they're cows.
Yeah, muskox do, right?
Amelia, you beat me to it. Damn it.
No, but also like muskox do, and like the higher altitude breeds of domestic cattle do.
Yeah, and there's like Highlands cows that have.
I was gonna say Highlands cows do, and yaks and muskox, but also they're living in places that are colder, I'm sure, on average than Massachusetts.
Muskox are also smaller than you think they are.
It may be also possible that like Tyrrellus could be broaching the kind of size limit, a point where feather reduction might begin to be something you'd expect, and it just happened to live in a cold environment, and so like it's not strictly for insulation, but like they are going to insulate, like they're going to perform that function, whether that's kind of why they're there, quote unquote, or not.
But also, I think it's
it's built different.
It might be built different. Thank you. I think it is. I think one thing that is worth consideration is like square cube law stuff, and like scaling of surface area to body mass. Right. The general rule of thumb is that as you scale linear dimensions, you scale surface area by the square of that factor and volume by the cube. Right. So if you make yourself twice as long, your surface area goes up. It's 4 times larger, and your volume is 8 times larger. And so as you get more massive, like you start having a difficulty with losing heat. So generally, larger animals are going to have less insulation than smaller ones, and that is an interesting thing. The dinosaurs are kind of a different shape than mammals, with long tails and long limbs. Like they don't have, like cows are kind of built squat. Dinosaurs have a long tail. And so I think proportionally their surface area would be higher. And I don't think there's any reason to think that like a 1 ton dinosaur, I don't think is large enough that it needs to start reducing feathers to not overheat.
No.
And I think that if it's living in a fairly temperate environment, that's even more so. But like, I think you could have Tyrrellus in the tropics and it would be relatively okay. And if it needed to cool down, you know what it would do? It would pee on itself.
Oh, but now Dinocyrus can't pee on itself, but no, kidding.
Well, that's just a fun way of reminding you birds thermoregulate in ways that I don't like.
And also, I mean, just kind of building off of that, there's, and I don't think this is unfounded. I think this is smart and good and reasonable. But like, we are doing our best to understand how like thermoregulation works in these animals, and these are like crude proxies often. There is so much variation in just how extant animals like thermoregulate. I wouldn't be surprised if in the extinct world, like you can draw similarities, but there are strategies you wouldn't even like begin to consider.
Maybe they poop on themselves too.
Maybe. Thanks, James. Yeah, maybe they poop on themselves. I mean, right. I'm so stupid. Why did I think I could have something I could share?
No, I'm sorry. Alex, without me being glib, it's an important point. I know.
What if they were just built different, James?
They might have been built different.
Anyway,
we haven't done phylogeny yet.
There is something he can share.
Fine. There's so many cool things to talk about on this one. I have to talk about phylogeny. All right. I think we've done basically every ceratopsian in this game so far. Have we?
We're missing the
We're close to.
I think we're missing this. I'll find out which ones we're missing while you're talking.
Please find out which ones we're missing, Scott. This is a ceratopsian. You might recall seeing him in other key roles, such as this is what a Triceratops is, or have you heard of Psittacosaurus? These are all ceratopsians. Early ones, small, bipedal. As they go on, some they get bigger head, some quadrupedal as the head gets big-o. And then there's Ceratopsidae, which is the family, which includes centrosaurians and chasmosaurians. Chasmosaurians are generally characterized by long skull, long brow horns. Centrosaurians are characterized usually by short skull and no postorbital. Well, like we alluded to earlier, there's that big nasal horn and almost no postorbital horn thing is not quite the pattern it seems to be, but short skull generally, and very few of them have the postorbital horns. Anyway, almost called it something else. Pachyrhinosaurus is a centrosaurian, as we've talked about earlier, and relative to the animals we've discussed in this game, I think it's most closely related to Styracosaurus. Mm-hmm. And I think, is that still what's that tribe called? Is that still a valid tribe of? It's not in Pachyrhinosaurinae, right? Styracosaurus, I think, is outside in Centrosaurinae, or maybe I'm misremembering that.
Well, Styracosaurus is in Centrosaurinae.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, but Pachyrhinosaurus is a Pachyrhinosaurin, not a centrosaurin.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah.
They're both eucentrosaurs. Right.
Yes.
True. Okay, excellent. And then outside of that is Sinoceratops, which isn't that interesting. We won't say anything more about that. So the only centrosaurian we haven't talked about is Pseudoceratops, which is interesting because it's one that is more. It's an earlier branching member of that. Oh God, do I have to say subfamily? Is that what it is?
Just say clade.
Of that clade, and it is very different than the other ones we've looked at, and some pretty cool anatomy. The Nares is weird, and it has these really cool horns, but we'll talk about that later. Anyway, that's phylogeny.
I'm going to say some gripes really quickly. Just
I have some too.
Welcome to Gripe Corner. They added this little kind of jugal horn that looks like a twig or something. We don't have evidence of that, and it's really weird looking. I don't love the shoulder hump at all. Like the tallest part of pretty much any ceratopsian's body is its hips, and for some reason they've given it. It's kind of like the Sinoceratops' ugly rhino body.
Yeah,
those are my gripes.
I mean, it's one of the only things I don't like about the design is that like it's just so the body profile doesn't look right, and I feel like it looks not right in a pretty obvious way.
Yeah, it's one of the things that it's hard to get correct about ceratopsians is that, and the best way that I've always like tried to convey to artists about it is always remember that this was a bipedal animal that mashed itself into becoming quadrupedal. Like they're kind of a bit more lightly built animals than you would think. They're very heavily muscled, but they're not mammal chunky.
No,
in that way. Also, the tail's too long, and the feet are awful.
Yeah,
they're extra bad. I don't know what they did on this one. It looks like they put a little extra meat on the face. I know we got a comment literally today asking like, "Hey, I don't know, like I'm watching your videos, and I don't know if you talk about it in some of the other ceratopsians, but do you talk about cheeks at all?" And we'll just really quickly say they had cheeks. But I think that they put a little bit too much fat on the head on this one.
Yes. Shall we take it to the viewer?
The neck also looks a little too short. Like it looks like someone touched their neck and it went like like that.
Maybe that's why it has the hump. All of its vertebrae are being pushed up.
Yes. Well, let's take it to the species viewer.
Okay. I think it looks fine. It looks the back hump is much worse in the species viewer than it was in the game, which makes me not happy because I was like just vibing with it. In the game, I thought it looked good enough because like I don't know that the tail's too short. I don't care about the feet, so like those things aren't bothering me. I think the face looks really good, even though it's like a little jowly. Like it doesn't bother me. I like the patterns. I like the horns and bumps and lumps. As we talked about, like it does very clearly reference like a species of the three, which is great. I don't know where are the other ceratopsians that we've already ranked, like Trike and Toro and
which, by the way, also to answer Alex's question from earlier, it's just Nasutoceratops and Chasmosaurus as our last two ceratopsians. Other ceratopsians, we have Styracosaurus in S tier, Torosaurus in S tier, Pentaceratops in A tier, Triceratops in B tier, and Sinoceratops condemned to the bowels of Tartarus in D tier.
Right. Okay. I think,
and where it will remain.
Yeah. Okay, I think in that case, it's better than Triceratops by a lot, but it's not S tier, so I'm going to give it an A. Because, like, I like it. I think it looks fine. It's not horrendous. It looks like the animal, and the patterns are nice.
Okay, that's fair. I respect that.
I do like the pattern. I like that the frill kind of shows splashes of color that change with the different skins. I think that that's a good... Like, I think Pentaceratops also did that, and Torosaurus does it. I like it. I think eye spots and the like are really likely to have been present on these frills. I love designs that emphasize this as kind of a warning structure as well. I'm not in love with Pachyrhinosaurus. And
clearly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, it's not a bad animal. Again, I'm just saying I'm amazed it's popular in the way that, like, if Camarasaurus were the most popular sauropod, I would be surprised.
That's
like,
a good point.
It's not bad. It's just like it's not that special looking to me. The hump on the shoulders and the really like the not great feet kind of make this lower for me. I like the head, even though it's a little jowly. It's a shame. I like the head. I just don't love the body. I'm going to give this a B tier. It's like, I don't find it offensive at all. I just don't. Oop, sorry. I can't put it in A. So B.
Okay.
I think I'll agree with what you said right there at the end, James, that basically everything from the neck up, fantastic. Love it. Would, like, do I have minor quips? Yeah, I would have loved if they accented the boss a little bit more, maybe even give some keratin pads on the little, like, bosses over the eyes and stuff like that, have those be a little bit more pronounced, but like they're small, they could be under the skin, like it's kind of shown that they are here and stuff. I don't like the little twig horn on the jugal there. It sucks. I just want to just take some garden shears and snip it off,
which is probably what would happen if it were in a zoo.
Yeah. everything from the neck down, I hate. It's bad. It's gross. It's awful. It reminds me very, very strongly of the Sinoceratops body. And because of that, I think I'm going to unfortunately have to give it a B. Because, like, God, I want to like it. Because I really do like Pachyrhinosaurus. But contrary to what everybody who studies ceratopsians thinks, it's not just a floating skull that is detached from a body and can be looked at independently from anything else it was attached to.
I don't know. I think that's a good joke, but
I think any ceratopsian researcher would agree. It's a funny joke.
So I'm going to give it a B.
Well, I feel like every feeling I have about this has been echoed in one way or another. Head, love it. Beautiful, gorgeous. Love the spots. Love the bumps. Love that it represents a species. The rest of it's kind of mid, so B.
I'm in the exact same train. Head I like, body I hate. I too hate the twig horn on the jugal, and I don't know if this is going to make it in or when I said this earlier, it may or may not. The body, in addition to having weird proportions that I don't like, they've added these kind of feature scales to it, but I don't think they look very good. In fact, I think they look very bad. So that averages out to make this a B for me as well.
That's a shame because the head is so
it's
good.
A great head and beautiful colors, but it's a B.
Sorry.
No.
What?
Who is he?
Yeah,
This is the model that
Oh.
Sternberg made when he described it.
Oh god.
Notably not the Sternberg for whom the Sternberg Museum is named after.
It's one of the other Sternbergs.
There are too many Sternbergs.
There's a lot of them, yeah.
Okay, so, also, from our Discord chat from last week, I fixed the placement of Struthia mimus because it was in C tier for way too long.
Oops.
And you know, I think that was a good place for it. I do.
Where it belongs. It's where it belongs. Speaking of other things that belong in B tier, Pachyrhinosaurus.
Into the B.
We've been having a lot of Bs recently.
Fill out that tier.
Yeah,
We're really filling.
We're all lacking vitamin
all of
D.
our recent
Winter's
episodes
coming in.
Bs? Yeah.
Yeah, look at that.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Wait,
Well,
did we give Dilophosaurus a B?
oh, no. Yeah, we gave Dilophosaurus a B because Amelia put it at S.
Oh, God, I forgot.
Sorry, Nigersaurus. We can't forget about you, King.
No.
You're up an A.
A.
But we will see if next week is a B when we
Spin.
Why does it
Spin.
always come up black and white?
That.
That.
Wheel.
Oh my God, it's just I can't read it.
Yeah, no, it I don't know why. It really hates
It's Ed
this.
Wood, the wheel.
Are you kidding me?
No, what is it?
What is it?
Chasmosaurus.
I elected into existence. It's Casmosaurus.
We're going to bust through the rest of the ceratopsians pretty quick, I guess.
All right, guys.
Good job, everybody.
Yeah, we're just going to wrap up this video quick, and so I want to start thanking our patrons because our patrons really help us take the time and effort we need to make these videos as good as they should be. And we really, really appreciate all of their support of the Skeleton Crew. So all of our patrons are incredibly appreciated. And so we've got all of your names running in the credits right now. But we are going to give our verbal shout-outs to our most generous patrons at our Gorgosaurus tiers and higher. And these patrons are Benjamin Seepser, nickname 3110, Philip Fico, Andrew Niddle, Christopher Bellis-Jones, Adamolos, Dan O'Kyrus, King Zashu, Max Ironpaw, original username, Pythonic, Swamp Ape Science, and Wheat. So thank you guys. Thank you all of you for your support. Please remember, if you like the Skeleton Crew, you should like the video and comment on the video and subscribe if you do like our videos and you haven't subscribed yet. We really appreciate everything you can do for us. Any engagement with the video is a real big help for us reaching new viewers and finding more Skeleton Crewmates. And so we appreciate it. You should comment about 10 times per viewer is what I'm saying. I think it'll be a big help for us. So just, get out there. Make sure every comment says the same thing because that'll annoy Alex when he reads them all. And it'll be helpful.
He loves this.
Yeah, he loves it. Thank you very much, guys. Anyway, we'll see you next week when we talk about another fairly mid ceratopsian.
It's super mid.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Adios.